On this episode of the Contagious Influencers of America podcast, she embodies the American spirit and uses her name to spread her message of faith, family, and freedom, even after her husband's passing.
Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, said to me one time, he said, Taya, you always look at yourself as you're part of Chris's story. He said, I think Chris was part of yours.
This is CIA Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sands. Taya Kyle is my guest today. Now, as you may know, she was basically forced into the spotlight when her husband, Chris Kyle, became one of America's greatest war heroes, completing 4 tours of duty as a Navy SEAL. His story was told in the book and the movie, American Sniper. Now, ultimately, Chris lost his life when he was murdered at a shooting range in Texas. Now, Taya honors Chris's life with her platform and foundation, the Taya and Chris Kyle Foundation. You can learn more about Taya and other influential folks in our new Hope for the Heart channel at KeepTheFaith.com, where you are going to find all kinds of resources, tools, empowerment, especially for those of you who feel as though you are called to care for others. So that's at KeepTheFaith.com, the Hope for the Heart channel. So how you doing?
Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Take me back and refresh my memory and the memory of our viewers as to who your wonderful husband was.
Okay. So Chris Kyle is my husband, and people know him best as the American Sniper. Incredible person, super humble, didn't want a book about him, which is part of the irony of it all and how God works. The most humble guy, liked to be in the back of the photos with sunglasses and a baseball hat, don't notice me, He grew a beard during this time, and one of his ideas was that he would keep the beard until the press part was over, and then he would shave it so nobody would recognize him. He really was a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, and I think God used him to do some pretty incredible things with that humility. And I think that's an uncommon thing for people in the spotlight, to be naturally super humble. Most people are choosing it, and he wasn't choosing it.
Mm. And what is he known for?
So he was known for, really, I think, the wars in the Middle East, representing the story of the warriors and their story at home. People say that he had the most kills. As happens in government a lot, they tell you what you're going to say. And, so that's been an interesting thing, because Chris always said he'd rather be known for the number of lives he saved. And that's really how he thought of his job. So when he was doing the book, he said he was just going to put his flaws out on the table. And he didn't want people to write the book that they were talking about writing. Different people were already starting one that was making him this legend and all this other stuff. And he said, if that's the case, I'd rather do it myself so that I can honor the people I served with. And he wanted our story, the family story, in there, which I wasn't sure was a great idea. But in hindsight, it was a fabulous idea. It's brought a lot of peace to a lot of people who feel it's their story too. And our first time sitting down to write the book, he went into some deep things that we faced that were not our most flattering moments. And I was thinking, oh, we're going to do this? And he said, why not? Right? And I said, okay. So he taught me a lot about just owning it all, the messy parts of life too.
Where'd you two meet?
We met in San Diego, and as I tell the story, it really was one of my first times submitting to God. Long story short, God had me in a place where he was allowing me to keep beating my head against the wall, saying, I want to live a life on my own, not need anybody, college graduate, had my own condo, Southern California. I was miserable, right? It was not going the way I thought. And so I finally prayed and I said, okay, God, if I'm not meant to go this road alone, which is what I felt like I kept kind of hearing from him, then you choose. You pick, and I want somebody with a good heart. I don't care how old they are, what they look like, what they do for a living, nothing. And it was just the most simple, submissive prayer. And I hadn't submitted to God, I don't think, before that, ever. And, just a few weeks later, I met Chris. And it was in church, would be what you'd think, but no, it was a bar. I was drunk. It was exactly like it was in an American Sniper movie where I'm vomiting the first night I meet him and he's holding my hair back. But I think that was the beginning of God revealing so much to me through our marriage, our life, my fears. After he was murdered, it just has been an incredible, powerful thing. And I really see Chris's life from the moment he walked into mine as the gift of God. So God was going to reveal so much to me through my life with him, and continues to during my life without him. It's incredible.
So God sends you a warrior. What was it like being married to him when he would go off on these missions? What was life like at home?
It was interesting. It was different every time. And we have an organization, Taya and Kyle Foundation. It's Service Marriage Strong for this reason that goes to what you're asking. It was different every time he deployed. So how do you navigate a marriage that way? You have to have the right tools. And we didn't have the right tools. And 97% of the enlisted guys in Chris's SEAL teams were divorced. To survive a marriage in that environment is almost impossible unless you have the right tools. So it was different. The first time he left, I was very afraid. I was very jumpy, but I didn't want to be afraid. And I didn't want him to feel that because he's going out to live his purpose. And I would get jumpy when we're driving, and just the fear was manifesting in different ways. And that first time he deployed, he started to cry at we were in the parking lot, and he was about to board the plane on the military base. So it's just, you walk across the tarmac and board. No, I'm sorry. He was getting on a bus that time. Sorry. The bus was taking him to the plane. And I just told him I loved him, and is he okay? And he's like, yep, sunglasses on. So he was trying not to make it look that way. And I love you too. Well, it wasn't until years later I said, well, you were afraid that one time. And he said, about going to war? No, I wasn't. I wanted to. I said, the time you left the first time, you were crying. And he said, that wasn't about war. And I said, what was it? He said, I was afraid you wouldn't be there when I got back. I never knew that. He never told me. And I had just assumed, naturally, it would be a natural feeling to have. But the reason he thought that is because guys were telling him all the time, a lot of times they're not there when you get back, and, don't sign power of attorney because they'll take it all and leave, or they'll have an affair, or, so that was, in the end, it was a real, for us, I don't feel like it was a gift, all of our hardships. And most of the time I would say they are, hardships are a gift in the end. I think it was a gift that God has done something with after he's died. And I do think the richness of it is that in our time together, I think military years count for 7, just like dog years, right? 1 year in a military marriage is like 7. We lived so much of life together that normally I think the experiences would be over a 50-year span. So friends dying, friends injured, extended family things, our own trauma and babies. And so the one gift I think that I could say came out of that was when we buried him, I knew I loved him in all situations, right? We were flawed. We went through hard things, and I thought, I genuinely love you. It's not like we had this honeymoon phase. And I think, what if we had hit problems? Would we have stayed? And that's a gift. And I think I vision when you pick someone, it's like going to the meat market and you find this big filet and you think, it's going to be an amazing filet. I can't wait to eat this. And it'd be good, but it's better once you take it home and you put some pepper or garlic or things that don't taste very good on their own. They break down the tissue so that by the time you have that filet to eat with the tissue tenderized, it's so much better and richer tasting. I do feel like that is something in our marriage. It was a wild ride, and we had some things that were not fun on their own, but together we had a really good, seasoned marriage.
When all this happened, what happened to your relationship with God?
My relationship with God has grown steadily through everything I've experienced since knowing Chris. And I think there's a feeling I have of losing Chris was like an amputation. I felt a part of him and him a part of me. And I believed when we got married, it was this covenant of forever. I didn't see divorce as an option. So I allowed that to become really a part of me. And I think God looked at me like the loving parent. So if I have a child, as a loving parent, if I know my child's going to have an amputation, I'm not going to tell them everything up front. I'm not going to tell them, you're going to have this, it's going to be awful, these are all the things, and this will be the good and the bad. I can't, that wouldn't be fair. But I would give them little bits of information to prepare them along the way. And then I would be with them during the amputation, and I would be with them after, and I would say, okay, babe, here's what we're going to do now. This isn't going to stop you. Let's build you up. Let's get you there. And I look back at Chris's death and God and say, okay, I witnessed other spouses my age and younger who lost their husbands. I went to their funerals, and I had that out of body almost experience of going, this isn't right. And why is the world not stopping for these women? And it feels weird that I still have to go to the grocery store to buy food for my kids when I feel like the world should stop for a second. There were all these realizations. And I had a cousin die in a tragic accident when she was young. And her mom was saying, there is no fair in life. It wasn't fair. I did everything I was supposed to do. I had multiple people there to watch her when we were gone. And they were only gone for a couple of hours, right? And still her daughter died. And I feel like God showed me these things through my life so that when my time came, I would be able to say, okay, like my number is up. And I have some sense that this is going to be awful and that I'm going to live through it anyway. And that I never expected it to be fair. I never expected to have the world stop for me. And my kids had already been praying for other families and knowing about good and evil, and that we believe that our friends were living on in heaven and we just had to pray for their families. So I see that God will do that for people, different situations, different ways, however it will reach them. And that's how it reached me in small doses. So I've never been angry with him but once. And the one time I was probably 5 years after Chris was killed. And man, the attacks coming in on our family after Chris was killed, I'm talking about from family relationships, lies, theft, it was incredible. And I was getting through all of those, still faith, thank you, God. What do I do? Go into the Bible for advice. People that know the Bible, actually. I didn't go to the Bible. I went to people who knew the Bible for advice. I wasn't reading it then. And I just got angry one day. I said, you know what? I'm sick of this world. And I think it's really, really crappy that God made this world like he did. This is awful. Like, these people are awful. Everybody's suffering. And I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I'm so angry right now. Like, this is a stupid setup, And she said, whoa. Like, Taya, come on a second. Hold on. Like, let's go back to all the good things. Let's go back to, it kind of brought me back to my core of, it is a balance. It's not all bad. It's not all good. We don't see all the good. the blessings. And so it didn't last long, but I did have that moment. And I think my daughter's had a lot more. I know she has. She's expressed it, a lot more of those lately. And Chris was killed when she was 6. So she had great faith, and she's a teenager, and it's making her mad right now. You know, not just his death, that was the big one, but a lot of other things too.
And how do you deal with that as her mom?
Imperfectly. I, at first, would just say all the good things and try to redirect. And what I also learned in grief is that sometimes you just have to say, it is hard, and leave it, you know, let her find her own way. And I'm realizing that's something that I so desperately wanted to fix her life and wanted her to be okay, that I created an issue for us that I didn't intend to. If I had it to do over again, what I would do is pull back the trying to fix and make it all okay, and encourage her to say, what do you think would make this okay? And listen and say very little and watch her grow, because I don't think we can, both are true, right? It's true that it's awful, and it's true that God does good with it. Right. But you don't have to acknowledge both at the same time. She can say it's awful. It is sometimes. And I can leave it at that. And that was a big growing experience for me.
So what was the big thing you learned during the grieving process?
Oh, grief taught me that there are some things that you cannot just work harder to overcome. You can't do it better. You can't read books. It is total submission. And that was a very uncomfortable thing for me. And there are stages of grief, but they don't come in order. And I had to recognize that I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't fix it with, just the right kind of healing method. I had to submit to taking as long as it takes. And that it would hurt and it would be okay, that nothing makes sense. I could be having an awful day and then laugh hysterically at something. Doesn't make sense. I could be heartbroken and have a moment of joy. I could be really happy and forget that I was heartbroken. It just depended on the day, right? And when I say forget that you're heartbroken, it's like, if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, and if people are going to judge you for it, so be it. I had a time where it was the anniversary of Chris's death, and somebody invited me to their kid's basketball game, a friend of my son's. And I thought, is it weird that I'm going to go and I know I'm going to be happy watching him play? Will people judge me for that? And I thought, judge away. That time I had been through enough, but it did still occur to me, right? But I'd been through enough to say, there are people, if there's a widow who gets married right away, they'll say she never loved her husband. If there's a widow who never gets married again, right? Maybe she just loved them so much. Or maybe she's a coward. And I say that with all love, because I am one of those. And maybe the one that moves on is courageous. Maybe it doesn't work. I know enough about trauma when we do our work with veterans and service members. People get hypersexual or hyposexual in response to trauma. They don't know what they're doing. And it's really easy to judge somebody who's going through traumatic experience. But I really learned just submission to the whole thing. Watch somebody else and just let them have it, man. It's awful. And however they do it, they do it. They're just trying to survive it.
When American Sniper came out, how did that impact you? And what impact has it had over the years since then?
It's interesting. The rough draft for American Sniper was turned in the day before Chris was killed. And the screenwriter, Jason Hall, came to our house immediately. And we became very good friends through the process of them needing to rewrite some things and do it differently. Everybody from Jason to Bradley Cooper, who played Chris, to the props guys wanted to get it right because he wasn't there to do it himself or correct it or live and let people see him live. He had been in the public eye for such a short time. So it was an intense experience. I was also going through, there were lawsuits that were continuing that started, business arrangements that were continuing from before Chris was killed, on top of the movie, and he had a book I was finishing. It was just a lot in addition to just, overwhelming grief. So I remember the first time that I got to see, and I didn't go on set at all. I understand that it's difficult to play someone in real life and have their family be there. They invited me for the last day, but my son had a spelling bee and he had already won his class and he was going up against the rest of the grade. And I was like, hey, listen, I gotta be at this kid. And he won, by the way. So even if he hadn't, it would have been awesome, but I was even more like, yay. And so I never went on set. So when I saw it for the first time, I was so focused on Chris and how they portrayed him that I don't think I recognized anything else in the movie. And I felt like they did a very good job. Chris was super funny and so youthful at heart, and we laughed a lot. And that's not a part of the movie because, you only have so long. You got to tell the parts that resonate for people, or a wider audience, let's say. The way it is, it represents all who serve. If it had been the other sides of him in there, it might have been more unique to him. And I think he would have wanted it. I know he would have wanted it where other people could heal from it. And then we had the premiere, and I wanted my kids somehow to know that they were there, but they weren't ready to watch the movie. They were 7 and 9, I think. And so I had them there, and in hindsight, maybe not best. They didn't really like seeing all of the cameras and the things and not being with me. Parenting, right? You just do your best and you never know. And then that was the premiere was only the second time I had seen it. And at the end, I just sobbed my eyes out and went with the screenwriter and his wife into the hallway and just was like, I can't, and I found out later Bradley actually sat in the theater and cried too after everybody left for a while. I think it was very, he really embraced Chris's mindset, heart, spirit, all of that. And then I never watched it again until my kids watched it. And they just watched it this last December, a year ago, with Bradley, because that was one of the things he asked, was like, he wanted to see it for them. Because when he was playing Chris, he wanted to do it for them as much as anything else. So I feel for people who have movies made about them and it's just not, it's a horrible experience. For me, it was an interesting one because I really couldn't absorb it all anyway. I was grieving. And so it wasn't like a celebration. It was heart-wrenching. They take a lot of complex scenarios and put it into small things. So I'm not me in the movie, right? Like my son watched it and he said, that does not seem like you, Mom. And I was like, well, I'm glad in a lot of ways, right? But that wasn't the point, of the movie. And so, but it's an interesting thing. We were in the murder trial during the Academy Awards for the movie. So on a weekend, I flew out for the awards, but I just had a migraine and was like, this is not good for me. But you just show up. I think that was my mindset, was I'm just showing up for whatever I can. I'm just being present and trying, But one of the prosecuting attorneys said, hey, do not look like you're having a good time there, because we don't want anybody on the jury to see that. And I thought, A, I don't think they will. B, I think I'll be in the background, not the foreground. But C, I don't know that I could be joyous right now anyway. But it was an interesting thing, right? Like you go to the Academy Awards, and as a kid, I might have thought that'd be really cool. And in that situation, I cried on the way there. I ran out. I didn't know you weren't supposed to get up in the middle of the awards show. I thought I was so high up that it wouldn't matter, but apparently it does. Apparently you're not supposed to do that. But and I left early, and it was, the movie has been an interesting thing. I'm so glad that I'm so glad they made it. I have heard stories of people coming to God in the parking lot after watching it. I've heard stories of people saying that their uncle talked for the first time, never did, that spouses are connecting and they never did. So for that, it's amazing. It provided me an opportunity to make a living for my kids in a lot of ways that maybe I wouldn't have been able to, speaking, and they traveled with me, and that's good and bad too. I mean, David, I had this moment where I thought in the Bible, it says, don't store up your manna, right? And I was so high in angst at that time that I was like, I better make whatever I can make now, and I better carry on the legacy the best I can now, and this isn't going to last. So we got a homeschool teacher to travel with us, and we're just going to go. And my coping mechanism is trying to outrun things and be so busy I can't hurt. So you put all of that together. And I was going, 90 to nothing. And it ended up later, somebody I trusted to help me manage things financially while I was doing all that. I couldn't keep a thought together. I couldn't tell you what city we landed in. I couldn't tell you to this day where I spoke. I have no idea. I was just showing up. And other people were helping manage where to go. And that person was stealing from me the entire time. And I think, right? And I think, so I worked for, it's like I was storing up the manna. And one of the blessings that I'm learning is God was going to provide me what I needed later. And the blessing too was that I got to try to cope in my way, which is to be really busy. So it's not like it was all for naught. I think he used my talks. Hopefully I got feedback that was good for some people. I hope it was. I always talked about God because he was so, I don't know how people do it without him. So it's been an interesting, I don't know that there's any part of this experience with Chris when he was alive and after that God hasn't revealed so much to me. And he keeps providing. And I've made choices that people would say are nuts, Fox News was so kind to have me on their national thing and get me a home studio. And I just started thinking, I think the stress of thinking about politics, and I would be sweating down my back before I'd have to be on, even in my home studio, and I'd get, dry mouth from nerves. And I just thought all of that together, trying to make sure it's stressing me out, and I don't know that it's where I need to focus. But who gives up that kind of an opportunity? They were paying me too. I could say yes or no to show up, and they're just going to pay me for 1 year this amount. And they never told me anything to say. I could say whatever I want. Never once even suggested what I should say. Who gives that up? And for your opportunities in the future, you're on a national news program. And I just remember thinking, God, I don't feel like you have this for me. I'm not happy, and can I give this up? And I did it because I also wanted to be a different kind of mom. And that's a leap of faith too. I don't know what comes next. Fortunately for me, I'm not too invested in the material things. I've gotten to enjoy them. I'm not too invested in them. They can be as dangerous as they can be good. So, it was what do I really care? I just want to be happier. So I let go, and he's like, I got you, girl. He's always like, I got this, don't worry. So it's been a series of, I call it jumping off a cliff without a parachute and trusting God to be the parachute. I remember one time I was so upset, and I called my friend. I said, I'm so tired of jumping. It's scaring me every single time. And I feel like I've shown God, I'll do it. And I'll let you be the parachute. Why does he keep doing this? Why do I keep having to jump? I'm exhausted from it. And it occurred to me later, because if you do it enough, eventually it'll be fun. Eventually you'll be like, okay, how are you going to do it? You're going to do it with the parachute fast? You're going to do it a little later? You're going to make the wind blow? So I've gotten to those points too where, boy, I have so much trust. And this last week, as trusting as I thought I was, this last week I went through something with my daughter where I had a new level of trust, And I was thinking, whew, okay, this is awful. But every time I'm doing that, it's like I'm holding on to something so tightly, like a rope that I'm trying to climb up, and I'm gripping it, trying to do my very best, because that's part of who I am, do my best. And it's like somebody snips the rope from above, and I don't think it's God at all. I think it's probably the enemy, honestly, but who knows? snips it and I fall down and I go, what the heck? Like I was trying so hard. And then it's like he goes, now you get a reset. Let's rebuild differently this time. And I go, okay, cool. Like he just revealed something new to me. And so I'm getting better at saying there's no sense in me trying to think about what tomorrow is. The type A planning, overly analytical, try to at least have a good plan, even if you can't count on the plan part is kind of, be smart, but don't count on anything.
Do you sometimes look back and see how somehow or another God had your back in a way that, do you ever see how the dots were connected to get you here?
Yes. It is so interesting. Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, said to me one time, he said, Taya, you always look at yourself as you're part of Chris's story. He said, I think Chris was part of yours. And I went, what? And I didn't really like it, at first. And I thought, well, okay, so we're all part of each other's stories. But that did make sense. Like, I don't think God promised free will. So if somebody chooses evil with their free will, he's not going to get in the way of it. And I think a lot of diseases are not from God. I don't believe they are, actually. But I look back and I go, okay. So as much as I love the Bible right now. I'm so just geeking out over reading. I finally found a study Bible I love, and it's Gene Gett's Life Essential Study Bible, and it's got 1,500 principles, 1,500 QR codes, and I can't get enough. It's explanations, right? And so I'm thinking, gosh, my life might have been so much better if I'd had this sooner. And then I paused and went, wait a minute. I might have been a really pious, judgy person earlier. It went exactly how it was supposed to go for exactly the right time. And so to answer your question, did the dots all line up? I do see it, how they all lined up. And I also see ways that, so for example, I was in Wisconsin doing school, and I was moving to Southern California where I grew up having summers. And I knew I should be in this job in San Diego. It was the right fit for me. But there was some, not great guy that I kind of wanted to date that was in Long Beach. So I moved to Long Beach. And I was miserable. Oh, for years miserable. And where did I meet Chris? San Diego. So what that teaches me is I don't know why. If I had a peaceful feeling toward that job and an excitement, that's what God wants for us, peace and joy. So maybe that's how he was getting me there. But the great news is, just because I used my free will to do something else, I suffered more than God. I don't think God wanted me to suffer. I think he knew I would, which is why he wanted to get me to San Diego. But I used my free will to go somewhere else. So he used it and helped me and got me back to where I was supposed to be. So I see how he lined everything up, and I see how I walked off his path a number of times and paid the price. And how now the more I've trusted, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why this is good. This is where the peace and joy is. This is how I can do it. And it's been an incredible journey, but I do see how he lined it up. And I think I might not have the words for it, but I see this thing of he lined up the good and the redemption, but man, my free will took me there and evil took me here. And the fact that he uses it all it's undeniable to me. You couldn't convince me any differently. The fact that we can trust him, you can't convince me otherwise. If people were to say whether there is or isn't a God, there's no convincing. I've experienced it. And so I believe that I have more hits coming. I believe we all do. I'm happier and less anxious than I've ever been in my life.
In our final moments, tell me about your foundation.
Okay.
And what you had hoped to accomplish, and how that's going.
It's a great question, what I hoped to accomplish. So we do have the Taya and Chris Kyle Foundation, Service Marriage Strong. David, that one, I felt like, okay, that'll be something we'll do at some point, because Chris and I talked about something before he died. Then in February 13, when he was killed, I was like, okay, I see that down the road, but there's a few things I don't have. And then God dropped one thing, and then a couple months later, the next thing. And I remember the third thing dropped, and I was like, seriously, God, right now? Well, in the middle of all of the other storms, here's this foundation we're building, we're going. And if that thing hasn't taken so many, I don't know, probably all foundations take their hits, but man, we've taken our hits. And so how I hoped, no, it has not gone how I hoped as far as those things go. How I hoped with the results exceeded my wildest expectations. I also still have a long way to go with it. We've started it over 3 times, and we finally have this like really tight, frugal way of getting a lot of things done. Fundraising is not my strength. So, I am, and then God's brought it in when we need it. So result-wise, yes, I want to share this with you. 80% of service suicides, according to a study the Army did, are relationship-related. I did not know that when we went into this. And I get it now, because you can only have so much trauma in your life. And then you have to be able to feel like you can succeed in your safe place at home. And if that's not going well either, and it's nobody's fault, they just didn't have the right tools, then, people want an out. And so we have a number of people that come to us that some part of their life, their spouse or the service member, they have suicidal ideation, and they don't after they've been through our programs. It's 2 years of programs, 5 programs over a 2-year period. And some of it is just the couple and a coach, and some of it is small groups of service members that come from all different walks. So firefighter, EMT, veteran, active duty. So they have nothing to risk when they share the vulnerable truth of themselves. There's nobody at work that's going to hear about this. There's no counselor tied to their work. So I don't say that we're taking credit for it. I think God has designed it. We have a partner in Baylor University who researches it and helps. We have incredible coaches, very small group. And then these couples, these warrior spirits come to us. And when they have the right tools, they're unstoppable. They just didn't have the right tools. And then they want to help everybody else. Like, we had a guy that he's a chief of police for years and years. He was suicidal, made an attempt to kill himself 6 different times, had gone to counseling, had different medications, nothing was working. He came into our programs, and because his spouse also was getting what she needed, because he was figuring out something at home, because he was talking to other men who had different experiences and different things, because our coaching was different, like sometimes just get out in nature, right? We weren't prescribing, it. And he'll get up and he'll say, I'll tell anybody. Put me in front of any group, anytime, anywhere. I'm so grateful. I just want to share this. So the interesting thing is we have all these service-minded people, and if they think telling their story could be service to somebody else, they're so excited about the change, they'll share it. I need to talk with some people at Hope for the Heart and how they market and do a better job of getting the word out. But like my spirit, yeah, that's everything I hope for and more. Now we just need to grow it.
Well, let us know. We're there any way we can help.
Thank you.
We have a big bullhorn.
Yeah, that's me.
And that's what it's all about. You gotta reach the people.
Right.
With storytelling.
Yes.
Those stories matter.
They do.
Your story matters. The stories that you hear from the folks that you work with matter. And the stories move people.
Yeah.
So if we can help in any way to get your ongoing stories out, not just this.
No, I would love that. So one of the things, and you might relate to this too, because you're obviously a people person and story person. I have somebody in our organization who's very good at hearing the story and the love and then taking it and doing something with it. I usually find myself like this and getting so wrapped up in the story and like internalizing it, and then I don't know what to do with it, right? Which sounds kind of interesting, but I think it's a skill set that you obviously have, and I need to learn from. So I'd love to learn from you.
Wonderful. Well, I could go on for another hour, but I know our time's short here, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again, Taya. You are such an inspiration, and I really want to thank you for opening your heart and being so vulnerable. We so appreciate you. And so appreciate everything that Chris brought us and did for us and did for our country. So thank you so much for spending time with us. And folks, if you want to see more of these wonderful interviews, if you want to be inspired, if you want to feel empowered, if you want the tools to help others, go on over to the Hope for the Heart channel at KeepTheFaith.com. This has been CIA Contagious Influencers of America, the podcast from the producers of Keep the Faith. Please do check out our website at KeepTheFaith.com, where you're going to find all kinds of goodies and all kinds of great resources. And of course, if you want to see a list of all of the podcasts that we've done over the years, feel free to head on over to ContagiousInfluencers.com. That's ContagiousInfluencers.com. I'm David Sams, and this has been CIA. Hey, do me a favor. This week, go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more interesting than living in black and white. See you next time.